Welcome, everybody. We're just giving a few seconds for everybody to come on in to the webinar, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jenna Moran. I am the co-director of the Association of State Floodplain Managers Flood Science Center, and we're excited to have everybody on today for this topic of communicating flood risk with Spanish-speaking populations in the United States as part of the reducefloodrisk.org webinar series. A few admin items before we get started. All of the lines are muted, so if you have a question or comment, drop it in the question and answer area of the Zoom interface, which is sort of right smack dab in the center, you'll see there. If you use the chat feature, your questions may get lost, so really try and use that Q&A feature because we do want participation from the audience. We'll hold the questions until the end of the presentation, but we'll answer some as they come on through. We have a recording of this session is underway. It's going to be made available within the next week on the ASFPM YouTube channel and on reducefloodrisk.org, along with the slides. You will see at the bottom there, right again in the middle of the navigation center, right by Q&A, a resources section. There are two resources in there, the slides from today and something you'll learn about later. This webinar is eligible for 1 CEC for CFMs who participate in the entire event, so don't leave early, and we'll issue those CECs and email you a certificate of attendance within the next week. And with that, I will pass it to David Powers, who is the ASFPM Training, Outreach, and Education Committee's pod facilitator, to kick us off and introduce today's presenters.
Thanks, Jenna. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So as a pod facilitator for ASFPM's Education and Outreach, I'm particularly happy to be able to participate in this webinar because 3 of the committees that are in our pod have participated actively in the development of this. The first one is the International Committee, who's been doing a lot of outreach work across various areas of Spanish-speaking populations, both inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. The second one is our Risk Communications and Outreach Committee, and they've been involved in the reducefloodrisk.org website development from its inception. And then the third is the Higher Education Pod, and they have been involved in this process as well, both participating in some of the committee outreach overseas, as well as through some of their legal expertise have contributed to our role here. Next slide. Today we have some really good speakers. I think we have some good information to share with you. The first speaker is going to be Silvia Reynoso. Silvia is a water resources engineer with the California Department of Water Resources. She's going to talk to us about floodplain management experiences working with Spanish-speaking populations in California. The second speaker we have lined up is Jenna, who you just heard from. Jenna is going to talk to you about the sort of the background on the flood risk management, reducefloodrisk.org website in its inception. And then the third presentation, Francisco Pena, who's the International Committee co-chair and served as the lead translator for this project that we undertook, is going to talk about how we got to the place where we were working on doing more outreach with the Spanish-speaking population. And Jen Marcy, who's our Risk Communications Committee co-chair, is going to be hanging out in the background. She's going to monitor the Q&A and the chat, and try to triage all of the questions that we will be saving till the end of the presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to ask if everybody could introduce yourself on the chat, but have a couple of questions for you just to kind of gauge who our audience is. If you could indicate, along with your introduction, whether you're a native Spanish speaker, a fluent Spanish speaker, or a non-Spanish speaker, it would be helpful for us just to understand who we're talking to. And with that, while you guys are doing that, next slide, we'll go ahead and bring Silvia up to speak about some of her experiences in California. Silvia, you there?
I was saying I was stop smoking, but I just realized I was on mute. Release. So what I was going to say is I am currently the program coordinator for our annual flood risk notification program. The slide here shows this year's flyer that we send out to property owners and public agencies about flood risk on their properties that they own and the body of water where they are at flood risk. We do this, it is mandated by law, water law, and I also take care of the Spanish helpline. And we do this as part of our outreach for Spanish speaking community. Some people would say, well, why not Mandarin? Why not? We have such a diverse community population here in California. The population in California, close to 39%, are of our Spanish speaking of Mexican descent. Immigrants as well as first generation Americans. So in part, that is why we have the Spanish helpline. I've been doing this for almost 5 years for this program. And what I find is I've learned a lot about the issues that a lot of these community members face, their concerns, and having a cultural awareness. I am first generation American. My parents are from Mexico. And so oftentimes when I respond to questions, if they are newly arrived immigrants, they'll ask me, where are you from? They'll listen to the accent and they're looking for a connection. And once they get an idea of who I am as a person and there's a level of comfort there, they'll start asking questions that they normally wouldn't ask. One of the biggest fears, especially in this current climate, political climate, is their legal status in terms of what will happen to their property in the event of a flood. We have nothing to do with that, and we're just letting them know that their properties are protected by state and federally owned levees. And I go on to explain what a levee is and what is recommended. We recommend that because they're at flood risk, that they obtain flood insurance and what improvements they can make to their properties. They can go to FEMA's website, NFID website, and get additional information. Oftentimes what I find culturally is that the Spanish-speaking community, predominantly it's the women that are calling the helpline. I have no idea why, but they spearhead making the initial contact. And once they are educated, have an understanding of what the levees are, what the bodies of water that are at risk of in the event of the levee failure, they tend to say that they're going to Guerra or meeting their friends or their lady relatives, people from church, about this program, about the flyer. They tend to keep it in their junk drawer. And I get calls sometimes from people that didn't even get the mail.
Sylvia, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt real quick. It's
Yes.
the audio is a little bit garbled.
Okay.
And so maybe Francisco and Sylvia, if you both want to go camera off, that'll help with the bandwidth a bit.
Okay.
See if that helps.
That, can you hear me better?
Yes, that's better. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So that is a program that reaches about 300,000 property owners. That's a mix of English speaking, not just specific to Spanish speaking. Now, my background, I have life experiences that have led me to this path, to what I'm doing today. And my childhood experience in the 1986 Sacramento Valley floods, specifically the Arcade Creek levee break that flooded my community, I saw as a child what something like that can devastate a community, and especially if it's socially, economically disadvantaged, and a community that's predominantly Spanish-speaking immigrants, and a fear of getting treated poorly by the government, getting their properties taken away, which is unfounded. But in the countries that they come from, those are things that are based in reality. That is something that they may have experienced in their home country. In 1997, we had another major storm event where in Northern California, the Feather River levee broke. One of the levees broke, flooding the area of Arboga, as well as the town of Linda in Yuba County, which claimed 3 lives and destroyed 1,000 homes, causing $300 million in damages. Most of these homes were farm working families. And at the time when they were evacuating, these people were getting on the roofs of their homes, and entire families were refusing to leave their homes. If they wouldn't have left their homes, they would have surely died. We had volunteers. The local Spanish news station was asking people from the local community to please volunteer, the bilingual people, to help these people come into a safe area. The Sacramento County and Yuba County moved the majority of the people from the Linda community to what used to be McClellan Air Force Base. And as a volunteer with the Red Cross, I was able to share information with these families that they were entitled to these services, to the free food and the clothing and the shelter and government assistance. And once they saw people that were, in a sense, familiar, that understood them and their background and their cultural traditions, they were more inclined to accept the assistance. And the turnaround in being able to bring them in and house them and relocate them, I feel, was faster than what I saw in 1986. Now, the most recent experience that I had was as the water resources engineer in 2023, working at DWR with my department in the Flood Operations Center and logistics. And in my career, the transformation in emergency management, when it comes to the floodplains and storm events of major catastrophic impact, thanks to NIMS and SIMS, today we're able to see that there's more interaction with the different communities. Our public information office, they are excellent in communicating and keeping up to date of different languages, the Spanish news stations, radio stations, and letting them know what's going on, and it puts people more at ease. And there's been times where I'm responding to questions from our floodplain management, flood risk notification program, and where they're calling, even though it has nothing to do with the program, they will call regarding trying to get information when there's a notification of evacuation. At this point, this concludes my information. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I think we'll hold off until till the end, but we'll circle back around on those questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next speaker is going to be Jenna, and Jenna, let's see. First of all, next slide. But Jenna, if you'd like to give everybody kind of an update on the website, how it got started, and what they can learn if they go there.
Yep. Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. If you have not yet heard of ReduceFloodRisk.org, it is a website that ASFPM launched in 2021. It was developed to help individual property owners as they seek to address flooding on their properties. At its core, it's a library of mitigation strategies and resources. So in its development, we took a number of different flood mitigation documents from federal agencies and other trusted organizations, and we compiled them into first a searchable centralized library within the ASFPM library. You can find that under the special collections section. But more importantly, we mined the contents of those mitigation documents to identify all the different types of mitigation techniques that could be implemented at an individual property level, whether that is sort of elevation all the way down to sort of those really low cost options of even just, making sure to remember to check the culverts and drainage ditches around your house to make sure that they are not backed up. And then we put them together in ReduceFloodRisk.org in a simple way that could be explored. The central feature of the website is our guided search, and property owners and buyers can come to the guided search, answer a series of questions based on their property's key attributes that then spit out the array of mitigation strategies that will or will not work for a certain property. And then you can later refine those results based around the level of effort required to implement the strategy, annual maintenance requirements, costs, and if action is needed when a flood is imminent. So those more decision support filters. When you get to the mitigation option pages, we include an overview of the mitigation option, the key property characteristics and decision-making factors from those filters, next steps in how do you implement that mitigation strategy, some special considerations that you should think about as you're deciding if this is a mitigation strategy that you want to move forward with, and then additional resources on that strategy, sort of linking to those FEMA documents, linking to those original source materials so that you can dig in further to learn more. The website currently has 40 mitigation options, and we are continuing to expand the website. So we have information not only for individual property owners and buyers, but we also have pages for renters and community associations, government officials. In particular, the government officials page and resources are slated to be expanded next year. So those will be much more comprehensive for those new floodplain managers for communities that have, maybe your small rural town where you wear many hats. you can come and learn about the basics of floodplain management from a community perspective on reducefloodrisk.org. Before I pass it over to Francisco, I do want to highlight that the website was developed by the ASFPM Flood Science Center in partnership with the project steering committee. And the original project steering committee included committee co-chairs from flood mitigation, flood insurance, and non-structural floodproofing committees at ASFPM, as well as FEMA staff and other experts, subject matter experts from federal agencies, as well as national nonprofits. And then now, as we're going to talk about further, we have the Spanish translation of reducefloodrisk.org, and the Spanish translation team has been led by the international committee. And with that, I will pass it back to David and Francisco.
I'll just let Francisco take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Hello, everyone. Francisco Pena, Residency Project Manager for a consultancy firm at the South Florida Water Management District. And it's truly an honor to be the lead translator of the specific effort of reduced flood risk. I truly believe that this effort could be a valuable resource for the 60 million Spanish speakers living in the US. And in order to tell you more about how the Spanish translation of reduced flood risk took place, I would like to first talk about how we were brought into this project and the importance of the International Committee. So what is the International Committee? The reality is that we are a platform to exchange knowledge at the global level and discuss best practices on the wise use of floodplains to reduce flood losses. In other words, trying to create a community that is highly interested in learning more about flood risk practices worldwide and vice versa. I think over the past few years, there has been a lot of effort on outreach, specifically creating webinars that are able to translate ideas and projects from overseas to have, for the US community to have more exposure on those projects, and if any of those methodologies or projects can be applied here in the US. Just to give an example, in 2023, we actually had 4 webinars. The first one, which is now has become more of a tradition, the European Union US Knowledge Exchange webinar. This one was specifically oriented to nature-based solutions. We also had our colleagues from Switzerland that presented their latest and greatest information on flood maps and insurance. And last but not least, our colleagues from Fathom on large-scale flood modeling, introducing case studies, not just in the US, but also worldwide. And we have continued to move forward with collaboration and partnership with other entities to promote the overall goal of flood risk management overseas. What do we do? So at the ASFPM conference, we have 2 main sessions, which is the International Policy Discussion session. The International Committee is the only committee that we don't really talk about policy, but we take advantage of the discussion to talk about how to have a general update on the most catastrophic flood events for each continent. So we have a specific session that it's called What in the World, as well as we allow the membership to share their ideas and thoughts on new webinars, as well as tailoring the session for the upcoming years. And last but not least, we have the concurrent session on international floodplain management. We usually have international speakers coming specifically for this conference. The picture that you're seeing right now, we had speakers from the UK, Australia, and also the US. And for this year, we had speakers from Brazil, Italy, and also the US. So little by little, we're creating a really amazing community that is passionate and really care about flood risk management across the world. One of the initiatives that we have developed over the past few years since 2022 are the FREDEX initiative, which is the Flood Resilience Dialogues Expedition, to try to connect with professionals and experts from Latin America, in this case, to learn more about their flood risk practices and how we can learn from them. I do believe the U.S. Does not have all of the answers to address flood risk management issues, and I think there's several interesting cases that we can use to improve our practices coming from Europe or Latin America or other parts in the world. In 2022, a delegation of 5 members from ASFPM traveled to Mexico City to meet with university professors, the private and public sector, elected officials, as well as the federal government, to have this two-way dialogue. And on 2024, which I'll share more information in a little bit, we traveled to Puerto Rico. So who did we meet? As I just mentioned, a number of different entities, such as the Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, which is the biggest university in Latin America. Also, the Autonomous University of Querétaro, and the Association of Engineering and Water Science, the National Center for Disaster Prevention, which will be the counterpart of FEMA in Mexico, as well as consultancy firms focused on insurance and early warning systems. It was definitely an eye-opening experience to learn more about the status and current practices in Mexico. And one of the overall achievements during this expedition was that we were able to sign a bilateral agreement with University of Querétaro to have this knowledge exchange between ASFPM and the university in Mexico. And this has been the laying foundation for this effort on reducefloodrisk.org. And they have provided considerable support on the translation, and this has been great in terms of, again, growing the community interested in international flood risk management. I will describe a little bit more on the process shortly. Now, talking about the expedition in Puerto Rico, we had a 15 people delegation for this event, and we met with a considerable number of entities. And just to mention a few, the University of Puerto Rico hosted the expedition, which allowed us to use their facilities as well as equipment. In addition to that, we met with the Puerto Rico Planning Board, which is the leading entity in Puerto Rico regarding the implementation of the NFIP, as well as the Institute for Building Technology and Safety and the Caribbean Center for Rising Seas, which is within the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust. During this expedition, we had the opportunity to organize 3 different field trips, and we learned a lot from the Rio Piedras watershed on the impact of extreme events related to the island, the Barceloneta levee, which is a project built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and has provided great flood risk reduction to the city of Barceloneta, and also Salinas and La Margarita, which are located, those communities are located at the southern part of Puerto Rico, and we learn more about the reconstruction efforts recovering from the impacts of Hurricane Maria and Fiona. What did we accomplish? this expedition to Puerto Rico was certainly, in terms of collaboration, we were able to be on the same page because there's a clear difference between Puerto Rico and Mexico does not follow the NFIP regulations. They have their own flood risk management system, while Puerto Rico is in line with current U.S. practices. With that being said, there's a strong interest from the island to establish a formal partnership with ASFPM to create a Puerto Rico chapter. This has been ongoing since April last year. We have been in ongoing conversations, and we're very close to make this idea a reality. In addition to that, the scientific and technical knowledge shared from the island and the main needs, that has also been extremely rewarding and helpful to us to learn more about the current situation in the island after the hurricanes. Also, another accomplishment is the increased number of CFMs. The Puerto Rico Planning Board, they have an agreement with ASFPM to increase the number of CFMs, and this has been this has resulted in an increase in certified floodplain managers in the island, so they can access to funding and apply different projects to follow U.S. standard protocols. And last but not least, this expedition resulted in an increased number of members from the Puerto Rico Planning Board and the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust to the annual ASFPM conferences. For 2026, we are currently planning our third expedition. At the moment, we're thinking Canada. It's going to be a good option. Still, we have not created the final agenda. It's up to discussion. But if you are interested, and if this is the type of academic professional trip that you would like to have, please consider it. And of course, let us know if you are interested to share additional information with you. Okay, now back to the Spanish translation for reducefloodrisk.org. The agreement that we established with University of Querétaro was instrumental in order to have the foundation of experts and professionals in flood risk management from Mexico to use the right terminology to do the translation. But before going into the details, I noticed over the past year or so that there were clear differences on the naming convention used to refer to ASFPM across different Spanish-speaking countries. With that being said, prior to the annual meeting, I shared a survey with the ASFPM International Committee membership for the Spanish-speaking professionals to learn more about their preferences. All of them come from different countries: Mexico, Puerto Rico, other locations in Latin America. And in my opinion, it was important to have a consistent Spanish translation to refer to ASFPM. Just to give an example, I noticed from existing documentation in the web differences from the ASFPM conference web app to a book that is currently being sold in Argentina regarding ASFPM. With that being said, and after having several conversations with colleagues at the association, we have decided to move forward with Asociación de Administradores Estatales de Valles Inundables. And this definition is also in agreement with what has been used in previous years in Puerto Rico. So yeah, we're going to be using this naming convention from now on. The steps on the Spanish translation, in order to make sure that we had the accurate, consistent, and culturally appropriate, as Silvia mentioned at the beginning, the content was developed and QA/QC in 3 steps. The first one, we created the Spanish, Mexican Spanish translation using professionals from different universities in Mexico, as well as they provided a solid foundation on the content. Once the first round of the translation took place, then the QA/QC step was conducted through detailed review for accuracy, consistency, and technical precision, as well as cross-check the terminology with technical literature and subject matter experts from Mexico. And last but not least, it is important to consider that this project is an ongoing, it's ongoing, first of all, and also we'll see improvements over the years, as it is a living document. So based on the feedback that we'll receive from the Spanish-speaking community and membership, we'll continue to make updates to refine certain terminology, as well as to ensure that the translation remain current, accurate, and user-friendly, as there will be additional content that will be included into the website. There were multiple lessons learned from this effort. First of all, we learned that there's an extensive community of native Spanish speakers with technical expertise in flood risk management. So having the ability to create bilateral agreements with universities or professional associations in Mexico, Puerto Rico, or elsewhere will be highly beneficial for the association as we move forward with the translation of reduced flood risk in other languages. Number 2, context is key, because there might be some technical words that cannot be translated on a word-by-word basis using, let's say, Google Translator, or now with artificial intelligence. We need to understand the context to have an accurate translation. Just to give an example, on the glossary section, for the word head, it refers to the height of water that is above a specific elevation for hydrostatic loads. The translation of head will be cabeza, which means head of a person, but the correct technical term for this specific context is carga hidráulica. And we encounter several other examples, such as the use of a structure. I believe the NFIP use a structure in their terminology, but when we translate a structure to Spanish, at least in Mexico, we will think about a metallic structure and not really correlate that to a property or a house. So again, depending on the context, is important to understand, and that we need to use a specific terminology for the Spanish community to fully understand what we are trying to say. And again, last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, the international collaborations could be the foundation to continue the knowledge exchange and technical support. Before I complete my presentation, I just want to mention that, again, this is a living document, and there are additional refinements that still need to be made, and we will continue to update as needed. So please, if you have the opportunity to look at the website and there's anything that needs to be addressed, please let us know, and we'll be happy to address your comments as soon as possible. You can also use the provide feedback tool to learn more about your needs or specific questions, and we'll be happy to get back to you. With that, I would like to acknowledge the technical team that was part of this great effort, from Megan Powers, Thomas Rupert, Alfonso Gutierrez, Daniel Salas Limón, Félix Santiago Collazo, Orlando Viloria, Luis Gustavo Jiménez, Natalia Lugo, and David Powers for the coordination, the technical support, the QA/QC, and for bringing this product really available to the Spanish-speaking community. If you have any questions, here's also our contact information from Jenna and myself, and we'll be happy to answer to any questions you have at the moment. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I'll start by checking in with Jen. Do we have anything queued up in the Q&A?
No, there are no unanswered questions in the Q&A, and there are no raised hands. Oh, one just came in. Hold on one sec. So hello there. Was the Spanish used for the website translation specific to Mexican Spanish, or did translators from other Spanish-speaking countries or backgrounds go over the initial translation as well?
For this very first effort, we agreed with ASFPM to move forward with Mexican Spanish translation, and it is likely that the translation will also be expanded to other Spanish-speaking communities. It is important to mention that there are some technical words that may change depending on the country. And again, for this effort, we decided to move forward only with Mexican technical Spanish.
All right. There are no other questions currently in the Q&A or the chat.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll ask one question of Silvia. If you want to, can you tell us a little bit more about your mailing outreach and the types of feedback that you get from the people that respond on that? Any particular lessons learned in how it's received and sort of the context, the cultural context?
Yes, I'll share some of the phone calls that I've received. There was one elderly gentleman that called, and he was pretty upset and left a lot of foul language on our voicemail. And I returned the call to see what was upsetting. And the gentleman shared that he was fully aware that he lived in a flood zone, that the body of water was the American River and the Sacramento River, and that there wasn't anything he could do, that flood insurance was expensive, and he was 92 years old. His wife was 89. Their home was paid. He had no home insurance because he said he couldn't afford it, and that their biggest wish was that they would die before the next flood and end up drowning to death. It was very disturbing, but very real. And just the delivery, he was upset that it was cruel that we were sending these mailers because it was just a reminder of the situation that they were in. And I let him vent, and then I had a conversation with them about resources that were available. One lesson learned in speaking with these people, a lot of them are elderly. Oftentimes they're elderly women. And I get a lot of calls from people that are about 75 years of age and older. I've had some that were in their early 100s. Those were all women. And usually the same thing. They'll ask if there's senior discounts, if there's special programs for flood insurance. And unfortunately, we don't have anything right now. Also, in terms of delivering the message, every year I kept getting calls in English and in Spanish where they would ask if the department sold flood insurance. And I couldn't understand that till someone finally said, well, in your mailer, you're saying that you sell insurance. And I read it several times and realized that it had to do with a comma. We had a comma in there in the sentence that if you read it the way it was written, it gave the impression that the department sold insurance. So we ended up removing last year that comma, and we ended up not getting any questions regarding purchasing insurance from the department. So knowing grammar and delivery of your message, you do it so often and repetitive that you forget oftentimes that English is a second language, and what you perceive as American Standard English may not be the case. Sometimes when I'm speaking English, usually by the end of the day, Spanish is my native tongue and English is my second language. And by the end of the day, when I'm tired, my accent slowly starts to appear, I've been told. And if I'm speaking to someone in Spanish, for those that are fluent in a second language, you actually start thinking, talking and thinking in that language. So the translation and going back and forth, the tone and the way you put the sentence together really makes a difference. In terms of distribution for those mailers, every year we get data from the county assessors. We have a contract service that obtains that information, current information, from the end of the previous calendar year. And that is used to come up with the current addresses and property owners. So whoever gets the property tax notification is the ones that we send it to. We have two different types. One is just the single mailer, and those are for single property owners. Then we have the ones that are multiple property owners, and those are a cover letter with a printout with a list of all the properties that are affected that are at flood risk, along with a copy of the mailer. And that type of goes out in a packet. And we have those for government agencies as well as the private property owners. And that could be a company or individuals or a living trust and whatnot.
I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say I've been watching the chat or the Q&A. Several questions have come in, and I wanted to maybe take about 4 or 5 of them and kind of summarize, if that would be helpful.
Great.
Okay, so several people are asking for a resource / like dictionary almost, something that would help with exactly the kinds of things, Francisco, that you were talking about. So the word head being not the same when you're talking about the hydrologic sense of a headwaters or those types of things. Is there some sort of resource or dictionary that has been made available or could be made available? Or is that something that you guys have come across that would be useful to the folks online today?
Yeah, I can answer to that. So the Mexican Association of Civil Engineers, which the U.S. Counterpart will be the American Society of Civil Engineers, they do have several resources that provide technical support on how to reference to a specific H&H, hydraulic and hydrologic, but in general, civil engineering terminology. I can certainly touch base with them to make sure that this information is fully available to the public. And if that is the case, we can easily include those as part of the ASFPM resources portal with Jenna.
I'll piggyback on that because and in doing so, ask for Silvia to weigh in as well. I know that I've heard Francisco talk about this quite a bit. There is a glossary on our reducefloodrisk.org website. It is still being refined. And I do want to mention that for anybody that looks at this, and if you have questions, if you see something that's not right, this is a document that's kind of living. And what we found just logistically, as you go through and you make an edit somewhere on the website, it ripples through. So sometimes things that have been translated become untranslated and that sort of thing. It's just a complicated sort of database that lives behind it that puts everything in front of you. And so if you see something, please use the contact us tab in there and let us know what you see, because it's going to have issues. That being said, I think the glossary will provide some of that information. But the thing I wanted to kind of reach out to Silvia and get her feedback on is it's not always about what's the right word or phrase to use. What I'm learning through this process is there's so much cultural context in how you talk about things, how you look at things. And that's one of my big takeaways here for Megan, who's asking the question in the chat there about how to communicate with people. It's not enough to have a Spanish translator. What we found through this process is we need Spanish people who understand both the culture of the Spanish-speaking audience, as well as the engineering and technical bits that feed into it as well. But Silvia, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
One of the things that I've been experimenting with has been ChatGPT for translation, and I have found that it doesn't always do a good job. So for those that are looking at Google Translator or ChatGPT or any kind of AI, be aware that they tend to not choose the technical words that we would use in floodplain management. They're looking at it from a conversational or academic language, Spanish or Castilian, not necessarily Mexican Spanish or Guatemalan Spanish. They tend to default to what academics would refer to as the mother tongue, or Spanish from Spain.
Okay, the next question in the chat is, what type of media would you say works best to communicate with non-English speaking communities regarding flood risk?
Is that question for me?
I think either of you.
Okay, so to date, I have found that the mailers have been effective for the Spanish speakers. Not everybody has access to the internet or feel comfortable and confident to go to a website and interact with it. And it's something tangible that they can hold on to and reference. I had an elderly lady that calls me every year, and Doña Cuca, Maria del Refugio is her full name, but she knows me well enough now that she'll ask for me, and she'll just say, "This is Doña Cuca," and wants an update of the current affairs of flood risk in her neighborhood, and if there's anything that can help her. And it's interesting that I've been doing this for several years, and people have become comfortable enough to pick up the phone and call the helpline, and whether they have the current one or not. And it's almost becoming a community, so to speak, where I've become familiar with some of the regulars.
Thank you. I'm just keep going through the chat. The next, there's a couple of people have posted some resources for potential resources for that sort of dictionary that folks were asking about. And then I saw one and then I lost it.
While you're looking there, Jen, I'll add just a little bit of our experience. Sometimes we have a tendency in the U.S. to take anything that's published by a federal agency as some sort of a gospel and perfect truth. We, as a part of this process, we looked at some of the translation terms that FEMA had put forth, and when we had them reviewed by native Spanish speakers, determined that a lot of them were not necessarily the best phrases to use. So everything should be taken with a grain of salt and verified. But I think that using your resources, and your resources are your people and their lived experience, is a really good way to figure out how to what the right way to approach something is.
Yeah. I found that last question. It says, how do you get Hispanic communities to engage in person? Any best practices to gain trust, to collect feedback?
Silvia, that sounds like one that's up your alley.
My professional experience, I have found that working with community groups has been more successful than sending out invitations to open houses and whatnot to bring in the people. I'll give you one example. It's not floodplain, but I used to work for the California Department of Transportation. And there was an elementary school in my old neighborhood, childhood neighborhood, where every year they averaged one child getting run over by a car. And it was the worst in the state, but they weren't getting any funding and to fix the problem. And so one of the moms approached me. It was career day, and she approached me and challenged me to do something. And I told her about all of these different programs that were available. And she said, that doesn't help me at all. Come and speak to the moms. And I spoke to the city of Sacramento, and I was told that every year they submitted a grant request to the department, and every year they were being denied, that they were fully aware of the situation, but they didn't understand what the problem was. So I spoke to the person, and the person said, we need to have proof, a list of signatures that the community supports this project. They need to have people to show up at a public meeting. And the people from the city of Sacramento said, well, nobody shows up. We have these in the evening, we have sandwiches, we have all this stuff, and nobody shows up. And so I spoke to the moms, and they said, of course, nobody's going to show up. We're feeding our kids dinner, and we're getting them into their pajamas and putting them to bed at that time. If they want us to show up, then they need to have those public meetings right around the time at the end of the day when we're waiting for the kids to get out of school. And so in a 2-week period, the moms helped organize a public meeting, and we had over 70 parents show up. They gave the presentation and they submitted the grant, and this community got $620,000 to make the repairs. And since then, they haven't had any children get hit by a car. So it's knowing your audience, and sometimes moms are the best people.
That's really great statement to end on. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and we will continue to answer questions that have come in, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future.